So, just to begin, um, and for the sake of having it recorded, can you share your name and your family
Yes,
history?
okay. All right. It's very interesting about the Yiddish theater. They started in Europe, Romania, Poland, and so on. And of course, Abraham Goldfaden was the father of the Yiddish theater, so to speak. But really, what was interesting was families formed a group of actors. There were the Zilberts, Rosie Zilbert, and she was a beautiful girl. Lisa Zilbert was the mother. The father, I don't know his first name. Teddy Zilbert was the cashier in the theater. And he was just wonderful with lovely cheeks and dimples and so on. Now you have the Bursteins. So we have Pesach Burstein. You have Lily was his wife, and his son and daughter were both in the theater. And I think the daughter was a ventriloquist. But I'm questioning, there's an actor on Broadway called Daniel Burstein. I don't know if it's his family. It sounds as though he were. The, don't
Can you talk about your family? Your
Oh,
family.
yeah, wait, I'll get to that. I'll get to a good spot. My father came from Poland. He was studying to become a rabbi because his father, Yudel Rosenberg, was a very famous rabbi who translated the Zohar from what was that? That's not. Anyway, translated it into Hebrew. 5 big books of them. Whenever they were said Zohar, they said Zoyer, and I was thinking, sour, they sour about anything. So my father was studying to be a rabbi, and the night before he was to get smichas the next day, he ran away and joined a theatrical group. The theatrical group was, they had a director called, what his name? He had one thing he would say to the actors before they went on stage, Berech Hafiz, which means break a leg like they do. And so it's an old admonition for the actors. Now, they weren't there were companies that would go from town to town to town. Some of them, the people who lived there, the Polish or the Romanian or German, they would banish the Yiddish theater actors. They didn't want Jews performing. So the Jews did perform for the Jews who lived in the little towns. And they had somebody who would watch outdoors in case a policeman came from the town. So, and they had one signal. Ach, du lieber Augustine, Augustine, Augustine. That was a warning that they were policed outside, and because they were speaking German, it was okay to perform. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
My father met my mother in a small town called Kanatok in the Ukraine, and she joined the company also. She was very pretty and delightfully vivacious, and so she fitted in perfectly with Israel, and her name was Fira. It became Vera, but her name was Fira. And my grandfather was so well known as a rabbi that the people in Toronto, Canada, wanted him to leave. He was in Poland and come to their town here in Toronto and become the rabbi there. So they sent him what is called a Schiffskarte, a ticket from the boat, and he came to Toronto and he became the rabbi there. And he sent my father tickets and my mother to come to Toronto and live with them. It was very interesting how they sent money. You know, postcards were very thick. They might be an eighth of an inch thick. So my grandfather took a razor blade, separated the two parts of the card, inserted money in between bills, pasted it up together, we sent it out, so, and Israel, my father, opened it up, he took out the money, and he could get ships tickets to come to Toronto. Of course, when he came to Toronto, he just wasn't interested in becoming a rabbi. He wanted to become a theater manager, a director, and so on. So they bought they rented the Queen's Theater. I'll show you a poster from there in Toronto, and that was Israel Rosenberg, and her name was not Rosanko at that time, Firo Wiener. That was her maiden name. And I was born in Toronto in 1917. So it was very interesting where the people in Toronto, they came down to the United States, to Minnesota and so on, and they performed in various cities along that borderline. And then they could come to New York and Philadelphia. And that was called the province. I think it's called provinces right now. And I was born, and of course I was a toddler, and we would rent a room from a missus, quotation marks, and the three of us would sleep in one bed. And many times when I couldn't control myself, my father would say, "She's keeping me warm. What do you want?" So that's how we lived for a while. We toilets down the hall and so on and so forth. We were in Toronto, we were in Winnipeg, we were in Minneapolis. As we traveled down, we came to Philadelphia, and finally we made it to New York. And my father was very gifted. He could write. He could write a play overnight. He could act. He could direct. He did all these chores. And my mother would help out. She was very short. She could play a young kid. She could play, as in my book, as she could play a boy. She was there. And she had a lovely, lovely voice. I think it was called a contralto. In New York, there was the Royal Cafe. Did you hear of that? That was the hangout for the actors. It became a Broadway show that was very successful. Eli Wallach appeared in it with his wife. And what's his name? Finkel was in there. Fivis Finkel played in there. But the real Royal Theatre, and I can see the marquee of the theatre, it looked like pearls set in someplace with diamonds. Royal Cafe. It was really royal. And they had someone there called Herman, and he was a waiter, and he seemed very obsequious when he'd run around and take off your coat, put it on, give you a napkin, fill your glass, and he would earn nickels and dimes, and he ended up, I think, a millionaire, and he'd always help out to support some of the theaters, if they needed 1,000 or 500, he was there to handle it. And for me, I felt so grown up I had somebody taking off my coat and putting on my coat and wanting to help me with all the food. So it was very thrilling to be in the Royal Cafe. At that time, they had a director of the Hebrew Actors Union, and his name was Reuben Guskin. Is that familiar to you? And he had a table under a painting, which I must say, I couldn't look at it because it had a naked lady in it. So he was there and he'd hear all the complaints of the actors. He didn't want to give me the right part. He gave it to somebody else. He didn't play the music for me. She didn't want to talk to me. She has garlic in her voice when I have to kiss her. So it was very fascinating for me as a young child to stay up so late in all the theaters and in the restaurants. And they always took me with them because they didn't have babysitters unless it was the missus in the apartment that they rented. And they would take 2 restaurant chairs with the curved backs with Thebon, I think they're called chairs, put them together, take a coat over the two chairs. That was my bed for the night, and they would stay and eat and everything. Sometimes she'd give me a little cup of coffee, which was like a whiskey for a child, but I would have that, and that was delicious. And then we had in New York, we rented a room and we stayed there. And I think at that time they were in the Liberty Theater on Liberty Avenue in Brownsville, and they decided to rent an apartment. Previous to this renting of an apartment, we lived in a rooming house also with and for the first time I didn't sleep with my parents. They had the bed and I had a crib with a rope. I mean, it didn't have many legs or anything. And we rented an apartment in Amboy Street. I still was not going to school. And that, I think, was the biggest thrill of my life. I had a bedroom. I didn't have it, but I could visit the bedroom. Bathroom, all our own. Without I used to have a box over the toilet, and I was always scared it was going to fall down on my head. And we had a kitchen, and we had a living room, and we had closets. It was such a thrilling experience for me. Finally, I think I reached the age of 6. The children had been going to school. Somebody instructed my parents that I should be going to school. So my father and mother took me to a school which probably still exists. And that was the most frightening occasion of my life. I had to stand in line. Teachers were telling me, move up, move up, move up. And well, who's your teacher? What room are you in? They scared me to death. Nobody had ever spoken to me with such language, and of course, they were all non-Jewish. And I had one teacher say to me, where was your mother from? I said, Russia. Well, tell her to rush back. That was the experience that I had in school. That was very frightening. And then we had to stand in line with all the other kids. And I found it so difficult to learn to read. I think at that time I was older than all the people in my class. Did you want to ask me something?
No, please.
And I couldn't read. And they work it by rows. In the first seat, in the first row, you read this. Second row, the book was Dickie Dare Goes to School. On the way, I still remember it, he met a cow. Moo, moo, said the cow. And that's how we went along with the seats. And then we had to learn the sound of H. By that time, I was able to read. And she said, does anybody know a word with H? And I raised my hand. He said, go ahead, Rebecca. That was my name, Rivka. And I said, tooth H, head H, because the CH was ch to me. So, of course, everybody laughed at me. I was not popular at all. When we used to play Farmer in the Dell, Farmer in the Dell, the farmer in the dell, hi-ho, the Mario, the farmer in the dell. And everyone chose the wife, the child, the dog, the cat. I was the cheese. So it was not a pleasant occasion for me to be going to school, but I loved learning. And my father went from Amboy Street, he went to the Hopkinson Theater on Hopkinson and Pitkin Avenue off the street. That was really a thrill because at that time I was able to go to school, PS 167 on Eastern Parkway. We had moved to Union Street between Schenectady and Utica Avenue. Those were the directions for taxi drivers. And I went to school there, and it was not pleasant for me either because the children were younger in that class, And of course, they had taken me to school at a late age. I was a little older than they were, and I wore very thick glasses because I couldn't see. And of course, I didn't read too well, and everything was very strange to me. The teachers were not comfortable with me. So I had a teacher, her name was Miss Cunningham, and we were drawing, we would get, that was the thrill of my life. I found myself, they would hand out yellow rough papers and crayons which were longer than the ones in the boxes that you bought. I thought that was so thrilling. We made Indians. So a child always draws a full-face picture of a woman, a man, a child. I decided to make a profile, so I made a bunch of noses, actually. She burst out laughing, and she said, "Go and show this to Miss so-and-so." I was so proud. It could only get laughter, actually. But this teacher was so kind. She says, "Miss Cunningham, I think, wants to laugh at you. Take it back." But I became a very good artist, and I'll show you a couple of pictures that I made. And I think I loved school. We had to make up a poem, and I made up this poem. Little birds in treetops, little birds in nests, sing for me on Friday when I do my tests. And she hung up the picture, and that was the proudest moment of my life. Her name was Miss Holmes. After that, we went to Chicago, and they played theater there, and I couldn't find myself there either because the streets were divided up so strangely, and on every corner there were a bunch of kids who would really molest me and hit me. But I really didn't mind. I just wanted to get to school. And what happened was a very fortunate thing for me. The grades of school, A is higher and B is lower. So I gained a term because they understood that instead of being in 4A lower, I was in 4A higher. And I loved being in Chicago. I was growing up. I used to go to, the drugstores used to have soda fountains. And I would go into the drugstore and get a chocolate ice cream soda. I'd go to the movies alone and see, the songs used to have little dots jumping over them to tell you what the words were. What was I can't remember what it was. I'll remember, I'll call you what I remember. And then we came back home to 1723 Union Street between Utica and Schenectady. My father still was in the hospital, in the Hopkinson Theater, but he had gone to the Liberty Theater. Michael Michalesco appeared there, and he was really handsome. And he himself thought that he looked like John Barrymore. He lifted up his profile. He opened up his jacket a little bit, and he posed. He was just terrific. And his wife acted as his dresser, Angie. Angie, give my hair. Angie, give me a shave. I mean, she was absolutely a slave to him. And I felt uncomfortable with that because my father was so different with Vera, my mother. He would run to do everything for her. And from there, where did we go? I think that's all I can recollect about my childhood there. Oh, we continued in the theaters that were pretty local. They weren't Second Avenue theaters. And my father finally made it to a Second Avenue theater. And We did move. I don't recall just where it was. That I don't remember where it was. And my mother by this time had joined the theater group. My father was well known as a writer. He wrote for Skolnick. No, Skolnick wasn't well known at that time. Lebedov and Michalesko and Ludwig Satz. You don't hear these names anymore. Ludwig Satz was a very gifted actor. And he had a record on that I used to be left alone a lot in the house. I'd play records, and he had one. Will nicht gehen in the cheder, aha, aha, weil der Rebbe schmeißt geseder, will nicht gehen in cheder. I just adored that. Then they had another record. Is gekommen nach gesehen, schön wie golde Siege, wenn die gehen, Bäckerlach wie heute Pomeranzen, Fisselach was beten sich zum Tanzen. I thought that was so delightful. I had a stool, I'd get up on it, and I'd get a Sonora record player, and I'd play all the records there. Of course, they had English one too. There was a Barney Google with the googly eyes. Barney Google had a wife of twice his size, and I'd play that. I'd play all the records. And they had one from Lebedov for my father wrote the play Mendel in Japan. Now, what he did was he took the Puccini opera Madame Butterfly and made it into a Yiddish play. And they had one song there that just broke my heart. Lemelach zwei, gewachsen in Wald, zerscheit hat man sie, zerrissen mit Gewalt. And then they had the most thrilling backdrop, a boat with lights on it, sailing along a beautiful blue ocean. That was the crux of my enjoyment. I adored that. Then there was, he played, his wife was Vera Lebedov, and she had a sister who worked in the Russian tea room. We would sit and eat there sometimes, and it was just great. And then my father began to write for Skolnick, Menashe Skolnick, who was a very gifted actor. And they took him to the English stage, where he played in Clifford Odets' The Flowering Peach. And the way it worked was like really that old-time way in Russia. A family had the stage to themselves. There was Menashe. He had his wife Hazel. He had a daughter, I forgot her name. And he had somebody was married to his wife's sister. It was very nice, Lipinski. And then they had other people. So they formed 7, I think was the list that they were supposed to follow. And they would play one play after the other. My father wrote the plays for him and the jokes. By this time, my father and mother were appearing on the radio. There was Yiddish radio. And by the way, there was who was the one who I forgot his name. Anyway, I'll think of it.
Do you mean from NPR?
But he was an announcer.
Benjamin Gavina?
He died recently.
Maybe Benjamin Gavina?
Who?
Benjamin Gavina?
Shemin Gavina?
Benjamin
Gavina.
Oh, no, it's not Gabina. It's not Gabina. He was on the English radio. He used to be for EVD. He just died. He had great hair. They all respected him. They showed him after JFK was shot. Do you recall anything like that? No.
Cronkite?
Who?
Walter Cronkite?
Yeah, Walter Cronkite.
Being told many times,
Yeah.
but okay.
He
was on the Yiddish, he was an
He
announcer.
was on
for Yiddish
WED. He was my mother and
He
father's
did
announcer.
every time.
And
Wow.
she said.
my father and mother finally
was-
managed this Yiddish Shiksa program with for Saks Furniture. and they would say, jeden Sonntag, pinkt en Herren sollt ihr do, Herren sollt ihr do. Some a veelach is lieber like Yiddish Shiksa Review. A veelach is lieber like Yiddish Shiksa Review. And my mother became what you would call famous. You know, they would call her Shiksalas. I used to join them on the programs when they needed a child. You know, Tante will defend fear crashes. Mine is summer. I could manage all these things. I could even do a baby cry. I did all the background stuff, and I would also do. And let me go up further and get this over. I don't mean I just in my own way.
Right.
uh, I used to join him on all the programs, doing various parts on the radio and so on. And he finally hit upon a play it was mentioned on the radio. And this is about a young girl who has a boyfriend in camp. It could have been boy Baruch, and they liked each other very much. What happened was she was caught in a fire in the apartment where they lived. Her whole face became inflamed, purple and black. So she's lying in bed in the hospital, and she's worried what her boyfriend, Henry, would think of her. And she thinks, nein, Henry wird mich nicht überlassen. Wird mich auflieben. Henry, oh, Henry, I love you so. But of course, he came to the hospital. He saw this woman with a girl with a burnt black face. He says, you darf weggehen, Betty, because my mama's waiting for me downstairs. So good luck. He left. Oh, she was really distraught. But there was something very interesting. I don't know if I could tell you this, but I see it on English television. I have to look at his picture and say, oh, Henry, he wouldn't leave me. He will always love me. But the people backstage, who are the stage hands and the other, they would hand me pictures that were atrocious. They were scandalous. Naked people doing all kinds of things, showing all kinds of things, just to get me to laugh. And I can see the announcers talking today. It's going to rain and it'll rain. And then I'm sure somebody in front is showing them a picture that they are just stifling and they want to laugh,
Yeah.
but they're not doing it because they're professional. So I was professional, and to go on with the story, I become somebody who works in a workshop for blind or other undisciplined people, and I fall in love with this guy. I forgot his name. He falls in love with me. He can't see this disgusting black mark on my face, and I fell in love with him. He has no idea what I look like. And we go out together and so on. Everything is lovely. Meanwhile, I have an uncle and his daughter in Germany. And my father and mother try to get them over into America. Now, the uncle is a very famous eye doctor. And he looks something like, who is it? The famous, who says...
Give me more.
Anyway, he had the white hair.
All right,
Anyway.
well, it doesn't matter.
Okay. And he says, let me look at your eyes. And he goes, I can fix those eyes for you.
This is
You
to
will
the
be
man.
able to see. So he does an operation, and lo and behold, this blind person, he sees. And what does he see? This girl with the scarred face and the black. But who else does he see? he sees the uncle's daughter, who's very, very beautiful and a mean bitch, actually. So what happens? Somebody knocks on the door and says, "Did you leave a pocketbook in the Amboy Street Hotel on 6th Avenue?" "No, I did not." "Well, here's the pocketbook that was left there by Mr. So-and-so." Oy, Gewalt. Woe is me. So she accuses him, and she leaves him, and my mother says, "Mit dem gedacht effen in dem Kopf, nicht der Augen," to a great round of laughter from the audience. Now, this actually is a trick that Aristotle wrote. You bring the audience up to a high point of sadness, of wondering what's going to happen, but bring a joke to let them come down. And that's, the teacher's going to enjoy it. And that's what happened at the time. So I always remember that. Anyway, things turn out okay for me. And he comes back. He loses his sight. I'll tell you again, that doctor really wasn't that great. And I'm thinking of this scientist who's out. And then we get together. Oh, he has a song. I must sing the song for you.
Please.
Menschen, oh Neugen, die Welt ist voll im Schwarz. Menschen, oh Neugen, mit der Weite in sein Herz. Of course, it goes on. That's big. Well, that's the end of my history.
Well, wow, thank you. So, what do you remember about the genres or the type of Yiddish theater that you were
Okay.
exposed to as a child?
The genres, you would have somebody who always did a mother, Lucy German. She would also have her family working in the stage. Skolnick at that time was her he was a son-in-law of somebody else who was related to her on the stage. Everybody was related and had different parts that they played forever. They were young men, Now, interestingly enough, a lot of the names that are used in the Yiddish theater are French. For instance, Siffleur is a prompter. Soubrette, a comedian. Of course, then there was the pièce, which is the play. And what else did they have? But all of them are parts of the French language. And of course, they also had the Italian language. So, just like the Yiddish folk, we had a conglomeration of all kinds of people from everywhere. It was great fun while it lasted.
Yeah, I've heard that actually the Yiddish theaters on their off season it would be an Italian theater, and there was a lot of sharing.
Absolutely.
Do you remember?
And because they went from place to place. There were, at one time, they used to translate theater plays from various languages and play them in Yiddish. And I was reading recently that when they played Shylock in English, one of the great Yiddish actors played it in Yiddish on the same stage.
Oh wow!
And that must have been something really fascinating. And let me see what else. Ludwig Zatz had a brother whose name was Elia Mintz. He used to appear in the Goldbergs. So it was really painful to see when Ludwig Zatz's became not as famous as he used to be. Elia Mintz was acting and getting wages every week or every month. Did I tell you everything?
Do you mind me asking you some more questions?
Wait, yeah.
In the book you mentioned the Grand Theater?
Yeah.
In your book?
Yeah.
Do you have like specific experiences there?
Well, you see, at that time I was, let's see, probably not going to school, so they would take me to the theater as I would.
Oh yeah.
And I, every child wants to see his father as a boss. So I was very lucky. Rosenberg was a director and a writer and so on. And he had a book and he would say, he would tell everybody what to do. And I must interrupt. Sometimes they would play jokes on the actors. Suppose the actor says, "Ihr geht reden auf dem Telephone." The telephone went to another place completely. Ich gehe reden zu meiner Tochter. She wasn't on the telephone. Or ich gehe even in a Schifflot and I rausnehmen mein Bix. That's a gun. Nothing was there. So he had to make up all kinds of excuses. Ich gehe es nehmen später, rausbringen früher. And that's how they all played jokes on each other. So what was I going to say?
Well, I asked you about your experiences at the Grand Theater.
Oh, and the
You said you were
Theater.
pretty
So
young.
we had Lucy and Misha German. And they were really, she always played a mother who the children were not nice to her at all after she had sacrificed. And my father wrote something that's one of the Yiddish poets wrote, that the mother was, he killed his mother. And he's carrying it to show to his wife who wanted her dead. And her heart jumps out on the street. And the heart says, "Habt ihr wehgetan, mein Kind?" Oh, he falls. He has a fall. And she says to him, "Habt ihr wehgetan, mein Kind? Did I hurt you when you fell?" Which shows how wonderful mothers are. So,
Yeah. Do you still go to Yiddish theater now?
no.
You don't.
It's not Yiddish theater now.
Well,
It's, I really, it's not what I've been used to. Oh, there was one other play, The Kishofmacher. Did you
that's
ever
what
see?
she calls me that.
She what?
My mother calls me that, her Kishiv Machrin, because I'm the youngest, and her mother called her that because she was the. Oh, your father.
Sie ist ein Kishofmacher?
Wenn mein Vater's Geschäftmacherin und sie ist mein Geschäftmacherin.
I adored that play. And Leonard Bart, who wrote the music for the musical Oliver, which
Yeah.
says he took all the music from there.
No.
It was extraordinary, the actors. The actor who played Hotzmach, who played the Kishofmacher, was always a man dressed as a woman. And there is an English play, Charlie's Aunt, that's just simply the same thing. And he was very gruff. And I think that I don't think, I know, he was supposed, Kishofmacher was supposed to be the person who owned the brothel. And she was after this girl, Muriel, and she finally found her. And she says, "Kim," and Muriel would say, "Oi, Kim, oi, Kim, 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 oi, Kim, oi, Kim, oi, ah, ya ba ba ba, Kim, oi, Kim, oi, Kim, 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 Kim to mir aheim, ya ba ba." There was an English TV program where they said, just say yababa and everything will be okay. So I remember that. And gradually, the Yiddish theaters on 2nd Avenue, and there had been so many of them, turned into Anderson, turned into other kinds of names. They're all, I would say, English or Goyish names for them. It was such a sorrowful experience. And there was one period where I saw an actor, but we were losing public. They were not coming. And 2nd Avenue had appliance stores and radio stores and so on. This person had a gorgeous, gorgeous voice. They were immigrants that had been taken over, and there was no public coming to see them. They would call it publicum. And the next thing I heard, he was selling refrigerators and other appliances in this theater. There was no job for him in the Yiddish theater. There was another actor, I don't want to mention his name, had a beautiful voice also. And he acted with Molly Pickett. And where did he end up? He was driving a taxi in Miami. That was just the worst. And I could see we were all going to starve to death. And I thought, where was he going to get a job? But he relied on radio, and he did sketches and books for the Hebrew Actors Union, and he was able to get a job on not but for WEDD, providing all these, and that's I think the end of my story.
Do you think that Yiddish theater and performances in Yiddish can make a revival now?
I would see it differently from how it's being done. But everyone thinks he's got the answer. But I think the people, and it's wrong to say, but I'll say it, don't have the background for the Yiddish theater. It had a specific taste. It was, you didn't have to even have the language, but if you saw a Yiddish play, that did it. I think I told you that I interrupted myself, that they would take all from some of the Russian writers and the German writers and put them on as a play, and they were just magnificent. Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, they had favorite plays, the seven that were hung, and the Yitzhak, and so on and so forth. But Goldfaden had a remarkable talent. He was multi-talented. He did the music, he did the script, he did everything. And he did the plays about history. That was the one about the Yitzchak being taken to the sacrifice by Abraham because God wanted to test him. He did at school at KBC.
Mm-hmm.
It had some of the most grand music in it. And I must tell you, some of the music that became popular in English was taken from some of the music in some of the Yiddish plays. And I played Yitzhak
Yeah.
in a little tunic, and when I was pregnant, I tried not to show it at that time. And when Abraham is holding the sword, I say, Oy vey futter, oy vey futter, wart noch ein minute. That was so painful what I think of it today. And then I was in a play with Noah, was there at that great rain, and I was also a young kid, and I sang, als neues Hort gemacht, der Teve, Regen hart bedacht zu sein. And then I say, sei der neue Chabach the Mabel shine mit Sakonis. And then there was one famous song by Goldfarb, Pinto Yid. Whoever sang that song had the audience joining him. And I'll sing it for you right now. In jeden Land, auf jeden Ort, hört es jeder gleich sein Wort. Je, bist dir, geh dir, wir dürfen dich nicht. A Fremder bist der Geld. Der jeder Wander wird nicht mit, entrückt den Herzen des Pinterle jed. Lacht von der Sonne, weil Gott ist mit ihm. Wer kann schlecht und wer Oftmal is for loschen dem Hiedels gemäht, beugt sich vor dem blanken Winterle, doch jeden something untäuscht wird nicht, wird das kleine Geschehen gepintele. Jedele dein Freund ist das Pintele, viel gelitten schon, hat das Pintele, gemacht hat deine Brüderlach, gepeinigt deine Gliederlach, geboten sich hat jeder in dein Glück. Bill im Monat soll auf dem Pintele, doch mutig allemal ist das Pintele, der kleinste Kerl, Jesuliko, lacht von dem Amuliko und bleibt auf das Pintele. Ja, ja.
Wow,
That's a good day.
that was great. How great.
Mhm.
So,
Is there anything else that you want to share?
anything else you think of?
I have one question that I'm
Yeah.
curious about. You were saying before that the Yiddish theater that you experienced had a taste that you don't think can the
the
Yiddish theater had a taste is the word you used,
Yeah.
a specific taste that you don't think could really be replicated today.
Yeah.
What's the best way that you can describe that taste in maybe some adjectives or a metaphor, whatever way you can express it to people who haven't experienced it?
The Yiddish theater reached each person who came, whether he came from South America, from Poland, from Romania. But the key to that is the language. You can meet somebody from France. You can meet somebody from Russia. You can meet somebody from East New York. But he knew the language. Stayid? Ja, ich bin ein Yid. And they could converse with each other. It's the understanding of the language that draws the people to hear the words that are said in Yiddish.
And that's the connection that they felt. Thank you. Well said. Very well said.
Okay?
Do you have a question?
I just want to add also, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Yiddish is very
I don't hear.
okay.
You say it after she says it.
Okay.
That Yiddish is very colorful.
Yes.
It's the people in the generation previous were like your grandmother, very smart, very wise. They knew how to say things in a colorful way that
Yeah.
was funny. They were all talented and they didn't need a college education. They were
Right.
educated in the home, the way
Yeah.
they did things. It was a very different
The boys had to go
people.
to school
Right.
to learn, to yeshiva. They always had a rabbi or so.
And it made them
Language is
smarter.
important.
The whole Yiddishkeit, they
Yeah.
were very, very smart.
The Mlotniks did a very beautiful thing with the folk songs. Did you ever see the books?
The Chronologics books?
Everything by Goldfarben, by other people. There was Cohen picked up. They used to travel from every area to pick up the songs, and some of them were really gorgeous. Now I must tell you that when the Yiddish forwards printed an English forward, they had somebody Gus Tyler, who used to do the Yiddish Winkel. And I translated some of the Yiddish song into English. So that was nice. States of Gotha Heisele, Stillvertrachter Heisele, in dem beiden Winkel weint mein Teier Resele. Jeden Rufen bei jeder Heisel, gehe ich sich herum, ich gebe a Pfeif, und rufe is Resel, komm, komm, komm. So in English that would be standing there. I can't remember my own word. Standing there. I can't get it. But
You were
anyway,
good
it's-
at it. You were very good at the
What-
translation.
what
You
about-
were good.
Yeah.
I mean, you really
It was
could
excellent.
rhyme it. And
Oh, down the street and yonder there, A small house seems to ponder there every evening by her doorstep. I call out Razor, and she says, anyway, that was it.
It is such a heart language, and the music is just heartbreaking too.
Yeah.
It's so feeling of Yiddish.
Yeah.
I find my grandmother like would always, even her English was always very poetic because she would be translating it in a way from Yiddish
Yeah.
that it really, I don't speak Yiddish. I can recognize it. My mom speaks, but um, just when she would say phrases in English that were just like so beautiful and poetic, and I realized that it came from Yiddish.
Yes.
It came from translating the language because there's just like a poetry. It's poetry to
Yeah.
me.
Well, some of the words and I'm glad to see them, but I don't favor them, have been translated and have not been translated, but used to illustrate something. I can't quell, they will say, or some of the words that they use in English. It's
a big
nice to
thing.
see them anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm amazed how you remember the words and the songs and the
Oh,
melodies
yeah.
I know,
and
I
the
know all the
history.
Well, she's also, I mean, she had thoughts about somehow doing something with all
I
the
remember.
music that she knows and
Good.
putting it together, and so she's done a lot of work on it.
When Margaret did a Hanukkah play, it was all my sketches that I did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But we used to have a group that did the sketches for the children in the various shows. Die Mama ist gegangen, im Molkerei nach Köln, hat sie mir gebracht, a Jingele von Polen. Oh, ist das a Jingele, a schönes und a feins, mit de schwarze Egele, Ketzele, du meins. Woody Allen did What's New Pussycat. He did the words for it. So he took Pussycat, yeah. Der Mama ist gegangen, im Molkerei nach Köln, hat sie mir gebracht, a Jingele von Gold. Oh, ist das a Jingele, schönes und a feins, mit de schwarze Egele, Ketzele, du meins. Hat gegessen Mandeln, hat getrinken Wein, hat beliebt a Jingele, es weiß nicht, was wird sein. Oh, ist das a Jingele, a schönes und a feins, mit de schwarze Egele, Ketzele, du meins. My mother went to Poland to get some coal, and she came back and brought me a Yingele from Poland. Oh, what a Yingele! So sweet and so fine, with the dark and shining eyes, pussycat of mine.
Really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
What,
Well,
darling?
thank you. Thank
Oh.
you so much.
I enjoyed doing it. I really
It was
did.
an honor.
I really did.